Conor O'Neill here from Everyday Athlete, where we work with everyday athletes who want to pursue their athletic goals in endurance running, strength training, physique change, and sport. In this podcast, my guests and I discuss principles, strategies, and stories that may help you in pursuit of your own athletic goals and in your life outside of that too. Something that I talk about with Owen and Peter, obviously your co-hosts on the Backdoor Cut. A topic come up was managing injury and I suppose the rehab process as well. And something that I asked Owen that I wanted to sort of touch on with you as well was with being someone with a knowledge base that's, widely grounded in, physiology and sports performance and strength training, all these areas, and having access to a network that would contain a lot of professionals and experts in probably the areas that you would be required to look at when it comes to managing injury. Knowing that you've had a few injury troubles in the last few years, how do you go about assessing who you should be potentially working with on those things, or what approaches you should be taking given the wide range of people and approaches that there are out there with any injury, that you could be looking at?
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things you kind of just have to look at the results that they're getting, as well as the experience, and try and decipher if it's something that's quite similar to yourself. I also try and look at the level of athlete they're working with, because it's with the injury problems that we kind of picked up, it was coming from, I suppose, being a high performing athlete, and a lot of it was coming down to the high speeds and the intensities and the loads that was being put on my body. So I kind of needed someone who had worked with athletes who had been working at a similar high level, because there's so much that goes into recovery that isn't just speed or gym or pitch training. There's also the emotional side of things, the stress that comes with that. So I suppose I did work with, I work with 3, 4, 5 different people, and probably had to work around and see who actually fitted the bill best. And it did take a while. Like, I did work with probably people that I didn't have great success with. I didn't regret doing that, but it just, I suppose, it takes time to realise what you actually need. And for me, it wasn't just about looking at the injury site and trying to figure out, I suppose, what was going on in that area. It was a more holistic viewpoint that probably I needed, and I needed someone who probably was going to be able to check in with me every single week and do a call and go over my movement and talk about how I was feeling and all that kind of side of things. And Alan Murdoch was probably the guy who really did provide all of that for me. Whereas before, I might have been going somewhere, getting a bit of a rehab plan, and then I suppose it was all over to me for the next 4 months. Whereas he was honest the whole time. How you feeling today? He might text you every single morning. He might call in with you the next week. He's going over. He's really, really delving in, assessing how you're actually moving as an athlete on the pitch and within the gym. So yeah, I suppose that combination of all of those aspects was probably what I needed, and that's, I suppose, now moving forward, if I'm ever to get an issue, I'm probably in a better position to figure that out and to know who to go to.
Because there's so much on the line, I suppose, as well, where it's going to take, probably in terms of the physical side of things, it's probably going to take a few months before you can see whether what you're doing is working. And I suppose if you've wasted that, or you felt like you've wasted that time, if something isn't working, it's almost too long of a wait. And probably then using the other things that you're talking about as a proxy of whether it's going to suit is probably a better thing to look at in terms of, is this person working with people like me? Have they shown results? Have they got those systems in place to actually be checking the things they need to check as well? So I think that's more important potentially than, or not more important, but probably a better approach than spending months working with someone only to find out that it's not working. There was another part of the injury thing that wanted to talk about, because it was something that I came across when I was doing the psychology, when I was studying psychology a few years back, which is the pain side of things. And I heard you talk about it on the Backdoor Cut on the episode with Matty Donnelly, I think. Where we tend to have this idea that pain is input equals output type thing, where you have a certain amount of maybe tissue damage and that registers in the brain as a certain amount of pain. But actually, you look at something like phantom limb pain, where people literally kind of experience pain in limbs that no longer exist on the body. And you look at the opposite end of things, where we've probably all been in a high intensity in the middle of a match and got a scratch in our knee and never even felt it. How different interpretations of damage can result in different amounts of pain. And you guys spoke about that in relation to, I suppose, the rehab process, and knowing that you're going to have to put a certain amount of load on a specific tissue, for example, and knowing that there's potentially going to be some pain there if it's an injured tissue, but knowing that there is a requirement to put some force through it. And how have you found yourself being able to manage that, knowing what level you're able to go to, for example, but actually still using the feedback from your body that the pain is protective in some way?
Yeah, this is one that it took me a long time to really figure it out, what was going on in my body. And I suppose it at the start I probably didn't have that self-awareness that sometimes pain doesn't equal an actual injury or an actual problem. And obviously, as you mentioned, like, your brain links a certain area to pain. If it's had it for so long, even after you've kind of cleared it up and you've healed and you've improved strength and resilience and all those good things, that link between the brain and the body is still probably there to an extent, and it's just trying to keep you safe is the main thing. So that's something that I had to really, really continue to tell myself throughout the whole rehab process, especially the time when I returned to the pitch. I probably went through a period of 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks of having a right bit of pain on the pitch, but knowing in my head and convincing myself that it's more than likely not still there in terms of the injury itself. It's more than likely the actual, just the link between the brain and the body. So that was difficult, because your brain will always find other reasons as to why there is an issue there, if you get me. And having been through it for so long and been out injured for so long and missing so many games, it was very difficult to, I suppose, convince yourself of those things, that it is okay, and that sometimes your body does experience pain. I suppose there is, I suppose, a thing between good and bad pain, and the more I went through the injury, the more I went through the rehab, the more I started to be able to link that pain isn't too bad. Like, that usually doesn't last, that pain. It's like there's like a different kind of sensation that goes on in the body between a pain that actually is an issue and a pain that isn't. Now, I didn't always get it right, and it took me a long time to figure out that difference. But over time, I suppose you begin to learn what's safe and what's not safe. And I suppose there's other things you can kind of monitor, like pain during a session might be different to pain the day after a session. A sharp pain might be different to a dull kind of ache. You know, it's very, pain is one of those things. It's very, very hard to explain to someone else what they should or shouldn't be feeling. It's more kind of a personal experience that you kind of need to figure out throughout your own journey. So I suppose something that kind of helped me was kind of jotting down like a number out of 10 as to what the level of pain I was feeling, and then kind of deciphering between whether I thought it was damaging kind of a pain or a link between my brain and my body kind of pain, which kind of sounds a bit weird, but that is the way that I kind of figured it out. And then that message that I kept telling myself of that, like, I suppose the key is being self-aware that can happen, that the pain literally can be there without there actually being an issue. Once you're aware of that, you can still have the confidence to keep progressing your rehab and being smart about your progression, like in terms of load management, sticking to what's being told to you by obviously proper good physios or movement professionals, continuing to build strength, not getting too emotionally attached to if pain does arise, and just trusting, I suppose, putting faith and trusting in whoever you're working with in that process that you are going to keep getting better. And it was funny, like there'd be times in training sessions where I'd have been like, geez, how is this happening to me again? Why is that so sore? I'd wake up the next day and there'd be nothing. It would literally be gone. And then I'd be right back to baseline. Like, let's just keep progressing. The next week, randomly in a session, it could be again, bang, another bit of pain, but then I'd continue to tell myself the story. I'm doing the right things. I'm actually getting stronger. I'm getting fitter. I'm moving better. I'm doing all the right things. So let's just keep trusting it. And the more I trusted it, the more I got fitter, the more I built load in my body, the less that pain started to feel. And then suddenly in the last probably 2 months, I've just felt nothing in my groin. And if I hadn't have trusted that process and hadn't have known that link between the brain and the body was there, I probably would have thrown the towel in back then. I probably would have stopped training, probably would have waited for pain to just completely go away again. And it would have ended up just back at square one potentially. So
I'm probably never getting to the point where you were able to push yourself to the physical speeds, load like that you would have been at before, if you're always playing under that limit of where you were experiencing pain. And you always have to, if you're the more confident that you can be, I suppose that the damage there, or that the damage or the injury is not the thing that's causing the pain in a way, the more confidence, as you say, you can have to push it up to just that limit, and maybe slightly beyond it, but allowing yourself to just keep pushing up that I suppose threshold beyond which the pain gets too severe. But if you're always going to play to below that limit and never feel that pain, you're always going to be limiting, I think, probably the amount that you're able to convince your body and convince your brain that it's safe to do it, which is ultimately, as you say, what the pain is trying to do. And another thing you mentioned there is related to the idea of load management. And I think you're probably like myself this time of the year, getting a lot of questions around recovery between sessions, recovery between games, and whilst nutrition, rest, sleep, all those things play a big role in the recovery process, and there are things you can go beyond that to facilitate that. I think what a lot of people miss is that idea of load management, and is just the idea of your body has a certain limit beyond which, if you push it, no amount of sleep, no amount of rest, whatever else is going to allow you to get back in time. So firstly, wanted to ask you, is that something that you've seen a lot? And for you personally, is there a way that you are actually tracking that load, or is it something more subjective? Is there an aspect of how many sessions you're doing per week, or is it something a little bit more descriptive, like how many kilometers you're covering, what high speed running you're doing? Are there things that you're looking at specifically to manage that load, or is it a little bit more subjective for you?
It probably was that, like, pretty specific at the start. When I first started back in the pitch, like, I would have been tracking, I suppose, distance, but I suppose high speed running was probably the main thing that I find correlates to whether you're going to overdo it or you're going to, progress nicely, and your body's actually going to adapt to the load that you're doing. Load management, as you said, it's the number one most important thing. Like, even if you're an athlete who doesn't move well and you don't share load across the body well, if you progress your load really gradually, your body will adapt to that, and you probably won't pick up any injuries. But obviously, it's more optimal to move well and share load and all those things. But again, I've seen many athletes get away with it simply because they manage their load well. And then even for athletes who move extremely well, even for me, when I got back playing and I did progress my load and I tracked all my volumes and my intensities and progressed gradually. Since I was playing intercounty level and I was pushing to get back and back, that kind of went out the window at one stage. And it was just like, I'm back feeling good here. I want to play. And I started getting absolutely dogged in training. Was happy enough to get dogged and spike loads, ended up playing full games within 3-4 weeks. I was just pushing to get back, and then suddenly I had a hamstring tendinopathy. and it was like I was so frustrated at myself because I knew the reason I picked that up was because I started to forget about load management. I started to forget about all the basics that had got me back. I was still moving well, but I just had completely spiked the load and the body just couldn't handle it. And that really set me back for at least 4 weeks. And even still now, it's a tiny bit of an issue. But again, like, I had no one to blame except for myself, because I could have known and made a change to what I was doing. But again, when you're in that environment, in a high level environment, you don't really have as much control as you do at a club level environment, where at the time I kind of knew this is a bit of a spike, but if I pulled out of training, I wasn't going to play. I wasn't going to have an opportunity to get back in the team. Whereas at club level, you know, it's grand. If you feel a bit sore, a bit stiff, it's just like, right, I'm going to pull out here. I'm going to be playing anyway at the end of the week. I may as well be smart about it. But yeah, I suppose I kind of went off on a tangent there.
Basically, just what are you tracking, if anything? It sounds like the high speed running, especially when you're on it. That's a lot of what you're tracking.
Yeah, so I suppose now at this stage, like, yeah, it would have been the Stat Sports GPS where I would have been looking at those values: high speed running, high intensity distance, accelerations, decelerations. I would have seen them, but I wouldn't really been looking to try and keep them within a bandwidth, apart from probably the high speed running. Now that I'm back playing and building load, it's not really about tracking what I'm doing, because games are quite uncontrollable in terms of what you're doing. I really just think of it now, right? If I have a game in my week at the minute, I let that take care of my high speed running. I let that take care of my high intensity distance to try and get a bit of speed in early in my week. And I know training Tuesday, Thursday isn't going to be that heavy. So I'm happy enough with unviewing those weeks. However, for example, last week we played Wednesday. That was okay. Recovered well. We actually had the weekend off, so we thought, right, this is a good opportunity to go and get some more high speed running into the legs at the weekend when we had a break. Since I have missed quite a bit over the last year, get a bit of high quality speed work in, and potentially up my high speed running volumes by 200 or 300 in that week. And then now I'm back into this week, train Monday, Wednesday, and we have a game Friday. So it's not something that I will start thinking about now this week. I'll just let the game take care of those running volumes and loads, so I can continue to build and hopefully try and push a wee bit harder in the game on Friday if I can feel good. So kind of progressing that way at the minute.
And then are you looking at other areas that you could be bringing, you know, the overall systemic load down? I suppose are you modulating your gym work, or, you know, up and sleep, rest, things like that? Are you playing about with those variables in the weeks where, say, you have a very intense match or something like that?
Yeah. So for example, like there 2 weeks ago we had 2 games in 1 week, and I understand that is quite a high level of stress in the body. So I prioritise, to be honest, literally minimal effective dosage in the gym. If it meant doing 2 sets, max 3, low reps, taking probably the overall just volume down in the gym, I was doing that. It's for me really at the minute, it's about maintaining levels of strength, you know, reducing range of motion in the gym so that I'm not going into training sessions or games with DOMs, and I'm trying to target the specific injuries, key injury sites for me in the body, which is, you know, hamstring and groin really. I'm trying to touch on them at least once a week just to keep a bit of robustness there. But again, like for me at the minute, it's really like 1 full body day a week in terms of the gym, which will go up or down in terms of the volume based off if I have 1 game in the week, 2 games a week, where the game is in the week, if it's Friday, Sunday. If I only have a couple of days turnaround, I'll really bring that down. And then I've got my primer session before games, which I've really been enjoying, which is, I suppose, another small bit of stimulus as well, in terms of strength and power. And then I suppose I'll get an upper body day in on a recovery day and try and filter in some zone 2 work as well as a bit of recovery throughout the week. Maybe once a week at the minute, given that games have been coming thick and fast.
Have you been finding the zone 2 work useful? Because I know it's something that a lot of people are utilising a little bit more, particularly like an off-feet zone 2 session where, you know, you're not getting the same type of muscle damage that you'll be getting from running, but you're not getting the same also type of just general fatigue that you'll be building up from a higher zone to, or tempo run or something like that? Are you finding that you're getting the benefit, and are you also finding that you aren't feeling fatigue from those sessions as much?
I'm actually feeling like I'm more recovered after I do them, especially if it's like the day after game. It's just especially for the assault bike, it's getting the whole body moving. It's like nearly a bit of mobility work. It's getting blood flowing throughout the body, and it's nearly improving that recovery process the day after a game, I'm finding. Now, it's not a case of like, oh, I'm feeling unbelievably fit in the pitch at the minute because I'm doing zone 2. Like it's not that's never going to be the way, really. It's just about, potentially an extra couple of % on the pitch, but also the fact that it's kind of aiding my recovery process simply because I'm getting the body actually moving when it's feeling quite stiff and sore, is where I'm probably finding the most benefits at the moment.
It's nearly sort of potentially related to that, the pain stuff we talked about before. If you're going in and doing a light session the day after a match, you're sort of convincing the body we're safe to move here. Yes, we've been hit by a bit of a high load, but it's safe to get moving. And obviously the blood flow side of things potentially as well could potentially be helping there, it sounds like. So we talk about the load management. Another aspect of that is actually, I suppose, something that you've touched on quite a bit recently, which is the movement efficiency within that. Because if we have two people doing the same amount of load, or the same amount of total work done, but one person's doing it more efficiently, technically that person should have less recovery need off the back of it, but should also, within that amount of work, be potentially less exposed to injury risk. And I'm wondering for you, what has been the principles or the strategies that you've employed with movement efficiency that you felt has helped? Yeah,
so I suppose key, for me was when I first kind of was assessed by David Gray, she's probably 14 months ago now. Like, he had kind of looked at just my overall movement, and like, my posture and all is pretty good. I would move pretty well, especially for a big guy, but there's clear differences in my hip internal rotation on my right side, which is quite a large gap. So, if you're limited in hip internal rotation, you're going to be limited in your ability to, I suppose, flex at the hip, extend at the hip, your ability to move through range, your ability to lengthen your glutes, which are an unbelievable muscle that all athletes should be utilising when they're running and sprinting. So clearly that gap was causing one area of my body become overloaded, and that was a huge part of my rehab, was trying to restore that motion at the hips, and it was something I did successfully, I suppose, over the last 6 to 8 months. When I got it reassessed probably in February, March time, like, there was huge improvements, and that in turn improved my ability to run, share load between both limbs, and then I suppose pairing that with, I suppose, working on specific key movement patterns of running and sprinting, like the hip lock, like horizontal hip projection, all those things that kind of mimic the patterns and positions that you're going to see when you're accelerating, when you're in max velocity, when you're changing direction, was another huge one that I worked with Alan quite significantly with. And we could like, it was funny, like, even though you're trying to address movement, I suppose, deficiencies on either side in terms of like the range of motion that you have, but there was also clear differences in the patterns that I was using when it came to like watching me change in direction or watching me accelerate, simply just due to probably bad habits over years of always using my dominant side. So that was something we kind of assessed through video, and something we tried to kind of consciously work on to try and start sharing load better between both limbs, especially when changing direction is a huge one, because again, if you think about your groin, like when you're changing direction, it's under quite a significant amount of load, and so is your lateral hip. So I suppose improving the strength of my lateral hip was huge on both sides, as well as my adductors, and then specifically looking at my ability to change direction, probably use my inside leg a wee bit better when I was pushing off my right. For me, I would have kind of, when I was going over to my right to push off, I would have just planted on my right foot and tried to use all the strength I had in that adductor to plant off, whereas really you should be utilising your inside leg to I suppose, reduce the amount of force that you're going to plant off your right. And then I suppose on the left side, I was using my right well, and I was planting off quite easily. So identifying that and trying to mimic the patterns consistently over weeks and weeks and weeks, and then improve the intensity, and then start to bring in, I suppose, defenders and things like that. So I was actually starting to bring that into the game-like scenarios, which was huge for me. So I suppose, yeah, identifying patterns and what kind of strategies you have been using, trying to change those and start to share load differently that way, but also pairing that with actually improving and opening up space at the hips was huge for me.
Have you found that, the isolating those aspects, translating well over then to your, obviously then you have to integrate it, as you mentioned, into, putting yourself against defenders and stuff like that, but have you found yourself getting to the point now where you're naturally sharing the load better, or naturally coming off that, using each limb as you should be on each side? Have you gotten to that point with it yet, do you feel?
I think it's definitely improved. I think the gap's a lot closer. I would still say there probably is a small gap there, but for me at that stage, like, it wasn't about trying to chase perfection and trying to be the perfect athlete. It was more so, can we improve this so that the load is a wee bit less and that I'm able to return to play? And then I was straight back in nearly in February, March time. So it was not as if we spent months and months and months trying to get it perfect. I'd still say in the off season it'll be another focus on trying to improve that further. Improve your ability to strike the floor hard and acceleration off both limbs. Improve the stiffness and elasticity at each foot, because again that was kind of there was significant enough differences on either limb for me in that regard as well. But yeah, I suppose it definitely has improved. We continued to assess video, I suppose, throughout the process, and it was clear the kind of the differences, from the start towards the end of that process. But again, as I mentioned, there's still definitely work to do there, and it's something that I'd probably try and put a focus on over the off season, and try and address those gaps, and just continue to up the levels, I suppose, continue to learn.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's never going to be perfect. And I know you mentioned before that you'd potentially, with other things as well, things like sleep, nutrition, match preparation, falling into the trap, I suppose, of if something hadn't gone perfectly in your preparation or with your lead up to something, it was almost becoming a case of it being more of a negative than a positive. You were going to, I think you spoke with sleep, for example, before, of saying, right, if I don't have my sleep routine absolutely on point, something that started as a really useful thing became something that was actually having a negative effect on it. And that perfectionist mindset potentially holding you back. Is that something that you've worked on and feel that you've improved with?
Yeah, 100%. That was something I felt like it was a positive when I first started implementing those habits, because initially they weren't great, and you're implementing good habits, you're improving your sleep routine, you're thinking about sunlight during the day, you're thinking about meal structure and protein in meals and colour in meals, and you're like, everything for me was just where can I get an inch here when it comes to nutrition, sleep, mindset, all those things. But then, as you mentioned, like, eventually that just becomes all consuming, and it's like, Jesus, you feel the benefits of it, and then you start to think, geez, imagine I didn't get that right, or I didn't sleep well, or my food wasn't right that day. My performance is going to go back to how it was before. If you get me, that was kind of the link. And then that, as you mentioned, it was just purely a perfectionist mindset that it was kind of creating. And it probably was only when that injury came about nearly 2 years ago now, that I started to kind of realise that wasn't probably favouring me, especially when it came to the healing process and trying to improve strength wise, health, even with my health as well. For a while, like, I wasn't sleeping well, all those things started to kind of go down the wayside when I wasn't able to train with any intensity. And then I think it was actually a kind of a psychologist guy that I went to talk to, and he kind of mentioned it to me about, because it was like my sleep was poor for a while, and I was kind of I went to him to say, like, I don't understand how my sleep is bad. I can't sleep at night when I'm doing all this perfect routine. And he just looked at me, he's like, how did you sleep? What was your sleep routine when you were 17? And I was like, geez, I didn't have any. Like, he's like, and how did you sleep? And I was like, perfectly. And he was just like, well, there you go. And it just kind of hit me. I was like, geez, I've built up all these habits, and yes, they improved me to a point, but they've actually got to a point now where they're starting to stress me out a bit, and they're starting to kind of pull me back. And that it's not that you need to remove all those habits and routines. It's more so that you can still live and you can still perform without everything needing to be perfect. And that was a big realization for me probably over the last year, and something I've kind of changed. And I still try and implement the habits as best I can, but again, it's not the end of the world if nothing's perfect. It's something I'm trying to coach as well into a lot of my own athletes, that I see so many athletes who are doing so many good things, going down the route of trying to optimize performance and do really well, but they also started up in that perfectionist mindset. And then I've obviously learned the lessons of I suppose the negative side of that, and I'm trying to, I suppose, coach that and I suppose teach them the lessons that I probably learned the hard way, before it gets to that stage for them.
Yeah, it's I think the switch sounds like it's something like, ahead of time, try to do everything as best as you can, but once the opportunity is gone to actually correct, to do something, let it go and just play the ball as it lays. You know, there's a golf psychologist, Bob Rotella, and he talks about playing every shot as that individual shot. So, you know, say you hit a bad tee shot and it goes off into the woods, you shouldn't be thinking about that tee shot being, or the current shot that you're about to play being a result of the bad drive that you play. You should be saying, this is a new shot, this is exactly where I'm going to play it from, and all I'm playing is this shot with the current conditions where I am right now. And that can definitely be extended to basically anything you're doing. If you're lining out for a match and you haven't had your perfect pre-match meal, you haven't had a perfect night's sleep the night before, there's nothing you can do with that. You just have to play it as it lays and go out and play the match in the current condition you're in given the current preparation that you had, and just forget about what came beforehand. But then obviously going into the next match with the plan that you're actually going to do things as best as you can. And it can be, I suppose, difficult to allow yourself to do that, I suppose. But with all we talked about there, it's clear to see that your approach to your performance is very in-depth, and you're constantly pursuing excellence with that. And I know that that's obviously, you know, it can be potentially a bit easier for the position you're in with your what you do for work, but for you know, the modern day game as it is, with the demands that are required of athletes at inter-county level, a lot of people would criticise the amount that's required and how professional it's gone. And then you talk to a lot of players at inter-county level, and they're like, actually, we wouldn't want to be doing anything else. This is exactly what we want to be doing. And yes, there's sacrifices of holidays and sacrifices of having to be training at a certain time and the hard work that's required. But, you know, people who are selecting to be in that environment can often thrive in it. And I'm wondering for you, how do you feel about that yourself? Is that something, do you fall into the category of feeling like this is what you want to be doing? And do you find that there are still people playing at the county level that would maybe agree with the critics who would say it's far too much?
It depends what situation you're kind of in. Like a player who is getting no game time and has dogged it out for 3 or 4 months is going to have a completely different opinion to someone who is starting consistently every week, has put in a couple of months and is enjoying their football and potentially winning games again, whether you're winning or whether you're losing. You know, last year when we were winning games throughout the league and and doing really well, I would have said this is the best thing ever. You know, it was brilliant. Potentially then this year, you might have said, Jesus, is this worth it? Do you know, it's nearly an up and down roller coaster of emotions. But I always go back to yes, without, like, if you didn't have it, you'd be happy enough. You know, you'd be, well, this is great. We'll go on holidays. We'll go to stags. But after 3 or 4 weeks, you know, where's your purpose? Like, you've kind of, as an athlete, you've kind of lost that. I found when I was out injured, it was all well and great. I went away off to Vietnam, went away off to Bali, brilliant. New experiences, experiencing new things is always a good thing, and seeing the world and travelling, which is again something a lot of athletes don't get the opportunity to do. But I always felt there was a gap there, and I always felt like I wanted to get home and wanted to play and wanted to go to the All-Ireland final and wanted to push on for next year. That was always something in my head. And for me, the more I think about it, always just comes back to purpose. And like, it's a purpose that not many people have the opportunity to have, like a really strong purpose of playing for your county, playing for your community, playing with your best friends. You're pushing, you're bringing your physical limits to a really high level without, you don't really have to get too much from within to be able to do that, because you're within the team environment and you have that goal of maybe winning a league or winning a championship or playing for your county. That there is driving you. So all you have to do is turn up and train. You're going to have to train anyway if you want to be fit and healthy. So actually having that for your county is nearly, for me, I just be unbelievably grateful for it. Now, come November time, when we're asked to come out and maybe train and run the roads or run, Nicarn, which is like a trail kind of running, like long distance running in November, I might think this is, I'll probably kick the head up. Like, I couldn't be arsed going to this, but that's only in the moment really, and we'll probably look back in 5-10 years and be incredibly grateful to have had that. Because as I said, it keeps you fit and healthy. It keeps you pushing towards a goal. It keeps you with your friends, and I think that purpose that it brings is huge for all inter-county GAA athletes, especially if you're someone who has a really good chance of probably playing and playing consistently throughout a campaign. It is extremely difficult for a player who trains all year, maybe puts in 3 or 4 years of hard work and maybe plays 3 or 4 games in that period. Like, that can be very difficult.
Yeah,
from what I can see.
It sounds like it's the self-awareness as well is a big point to that as well, both in terms of am I actually good enough to be playing, and therefore I can sort of justify this, the effort I'm putting in, but also the self-awareness of knowing, is this your thing? Is this the thing that you want to give 5 to 10 years of your life towards, and know that on the other end you're going to look back and go, that was exactly what I wanted to be doing with all the ups and downs. It was the thing that I wanted to be doing. Or are you just sort of going along for the ride because you have, the necessary skill to be there, you're selected, but you haven't necessarily made the actual choice yourself to continue to be there, but you're sort of hanging on by a thread. And yeah, I think the same thing that you said there is what I've heard from a lot of players in the same position. And the reality is, like, anything that's going to be fulfilling and meaningful, it's generally going to be something that's hard anyway. So if you're to give up the football, you're going to have to find a way to replace that regardless, and it's going to be something that has maybe not the same type of sacrifices and the same type of hardships, but it's going to have some element of having to sacrifice and having to put in the work to get there. I wonder, have you thought much about how, obviously a long way off yet, but have you thought much about how you would approach training for yourself post sport?
Not really. I think I'd like to probably pick up another sport, if I'm being totally honest. Something that's fun and something that's enjoyable. I don't know if after playing 15-20 years of Gaelic football, that I'd have the mental strength to go and run half marathons or run marathons where it's purely on your own. I know you've experience with doing that. Like, it seems extremely difficult, but not that I couldn't do it, but I don't know. I just don't know if I would have that in me come 35, 36, whatever it is. I've probably thought about, other team sports, over 40s GAA. Maybe CrossFit, maybe, I don't know, weightlifting. Definitely something anyway. 5-a-side soccer always is something that I'd love to get back playing. Again, that's not really competitive, but it's fun, and I think the fun element is something that I'll really try and go after when I hit that age. And again, Yeah.
It's key that I think at that point, like you're doing it for the enjoyment, especially if you put in the hard graft, as you said, 10, 15 years of really dedicating towards just excelling in a sport. Probably after that, it's more about the enjoyment and still getting that challenge as well. Like, but I'd asked Owen as well a question around if you were only basing the sport you choose, say you weren't playing football even now, but you had to choose a sport based on your genetic strengths and what you would be optimally suited to. Do you have a sport that you think you would?
I've always thought I'd like to play rugby, play a centre in rugby, because I feel like I've got the build for that and I've got pretty decent speed for my size. Whether that's possible when you hit 35 or 36, I don't know. Apart from that, probably there probably isn't that much more for my build. AFL maybe, but unless I go to Australia and play in like the lower leagues over there, it could be something that would be good fun and something to just explore another sport. Yeah, I suppose in terms of like other things like athletics is something that I never got to kind of explore at a younger age, and something that I always wondered, like, would I have been good at a long jump, or like I've always had really good jumping ability as well. For some reason, I don't know why, and it's always been kind of itching at me that I never explored that when I was 16, 17. It was all just purely Gaelic football. So I suppose it's something that I could maybe explore when I get older as well.
Yeah. It was like, obviously Aaron's experienced some success now at the Olympics, but you would wonder how much success there would be in Irish sport if GAA didn't exist, for example, because you go out to any inter-county GAA match and you see a lad who you probably look at, would have been like a mid-distance runner, and you see another lad who probably would have been a powerlift, well, maybe not potentially as many powerlifter type builds in GAA now, but you look around the pitch and you see so many guys who you look at and say they would have been perfect for a certain sport, or you've probably played soccer with lads who would have probably went on to be Premier League players, or all these things, and it's obviously great for GAA because you're getting such a mix of elite athletes going into this one sport. And it's great for that, but it would be interesting just to see the difference in Irish sport if GAA wasn't around.
I think another one I've been watching is the rowing, and it's another one that like kind of suits taller athletes, but it takes an unbelievable amount of dedication as well over years. And funny, one of my friends when I was younger, who would have been in school and in class with, and would have went to the gym, and probably would have been one of the guys who was pretty dedicated from a young age, maybe 13, 14, 15, like similar to myself, would have been going to the gym at an early age, and he's rowing in an Olympic final in the morning. And it's something that me and him would have always spoken about, would have been his goal was always, he would have always said it anyway to me, that Olympics was the goal. And the dedication and the hard work that man put in from 14, like he was actually, you'll not mind me saying this, but at 12 years of age, he was like overweight, wasn't really good at any sports, and he just completely took it upon himself to get in shape, go to rowing, train twice a day for years, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He's been at it for 10 years now, and he's suddenly in an Olympic final tomorrow. Like it's unbelievable to watch. But again, it's something that I thought myself, would I have been good at rowing? But I don't think I would have had the mental resilience to do the training that he has done, and the hard work that he's put in for that length of time. It's been unbelievable to watch.
Class. Yeah, such a game of just volume, isn't it? Like, it's just, I know there's obviously a huge amount to it in terms of technique, strength, conditioning and everything, but you can imagine it's just hours sitting looking at that skier screen and just going back and forth. But yeah, right, ask just a couple of questions I'd like to ask. One is, if you could have, say, 1 to 3 people from present times or history that you could meet up for a coffee and a chat to get a bit of advice or wisdom, or even just a bit of interest out of, would you have 3 people in mind?
kind of wish I had thought about this before now, but Michael Jordan is probably one I'd love to sit down with. Usain Bolt has been another childhood hero. I want to see how he runs so fast. Pick his brains. I'd probably go for maybe a GAA hero after that. I'd sit down with Colin Cooper. Pick his brains.
Nice. Good stuff. So last question is just to where is the best place for people to follow along or reach out to you with any inquiries that they would have?
Yeah, Instagram at the minute. McGurn Fitness would be the place to get me at the minute. I'm working on building a website and stuff as well, so hopefully that'll be ready to go in the near future too.
Thanks for listening, and if you consider yourself an everyday athlete, whether you play sport or want to pursue other athletic goals, consider checking out the Everyday Athlete program at the link in the episode description. There you'll find what's involved in the program, testimonials from the lads we work with, and how to apply.